Okay, back with another 10 what ifs in NFL history. I already uploaded 10 yesterday. I'm also going to upload 10 more tomorrow. But let's go with these 10. This has been a very kind of fun series to go over. And yeah, let's just get into the list. First off, and again, these are in no particular order, what if Pton Manning never had his neck injury? Of course, Pton Manning with the Indianapolis Colts had a ton of great years, but then had a neck injury, sat down for the whole year. The Colts really struggled with poor quarterback play after him for that season. They end up finishing with the first overall pick. There was a lot of talk about, are they, is it suck for luck? Are they purposely being bad to try and get Andrew Luck, who was this generational prospect? Everyone knew he was going to go first overall, even with RG3, a great prospect who could have gone first overall in many draft classes. It just wasn't close. It was always going to be Luck. And then people thought, okay, do you trade the first overall pick for 5 first-round picks for someone, for another team who wants Andrew Luck that badly? They decide to instead move off of Pton Manning and go with Andrew Luck. If Pton Manning stays healthy, does he finish his career with the Colts? Pton Manning had some great years. In fact, he had his best season, his 55 touchdown season with the Denver Broncos. Does he continue? And maybe he plays longer too without the neck injury. Maybe he's able to stay healthy a little bit more because of that. And again, if that happens, who ends up with Andrew Luck? It's probably Washington. And what happens if they have Andrew Luck? Right? There's that that wild butterfly effect. But ultimately, it never happened, which is what makes it a what if. And then Andrew Luck, he has to be a what if as well by himself, of what if he never retired? And, what if he never had those injuries that forced him to retire? What if the Colts were able to protect him better and he, felt comfortable and was able to play for a lot longer? Now, I do sometimes feel like people overrate how good Luck was in the NFL. Generational prospect, came in and was like, pretty good for most of his career, but his last season with Frank Reich, honestly, he had his best year. He was like a top 5 quarterback for, I feel like, the first time in his career, and it felt like maybe he was going to just be that and finally, be that top 5 guy consistently. Of course, it's worth mentioning, he had some deep playoff runs early on in his career as well. But ultimately, again, due to injuries, he retired. He would still be playing today, probably, had he not. So, very interesting. And the Colts would have never had Anthony Richardson, so we wouldn't have had that funny moment where he sat out that play. So, a lot of things would have gone differently. Next up is another health-related one, but I think this is interesting in a different way. So, a lot of these are, this team could have had something great happen, but it didn't, right? This is a team had an injury that in a way worked out perfectly for them. When the Philadelphia Eagles, Carson Wentz, having an MVP caliber season, maybe could have still won the MVP, although I think it was fine to give it to Brady that year, but some people felt like Wentz still deserved the MVP. Ultimately, he gets injured late in the season. Many people are saying, are the Eagles done? They're still the 1 seed, but can they do it? They struggle to get past the Falcons, who weren't great that year, although we're, a playoff team, right? Solid, but not great. They get to the conference championship, and then Nick Foles is awesome for the next 2 weeks. They win the Super Bowl. If Carson Wentz stays healthy, first off, are they able to win the Super Bowl? Nick Foles was so good in that Super Bowl. If Carson Wentz is there, is he able to do what Nick Foles did? I don't know. And I think it's very possible Brady still was able to dice up that Eagles defense. And we're talking about that game as one of the all-time great Tom Brady performances in a Super Bowl win instead of kind of isn't it crazy that he threw 500 yards in a loss? Like, that is a thing that could have happened, right? On top of this, maybe Wentz does stay healthy and they do win a Super Bowl. And if they do win a Super Bowl, well, maybe they're slower to move off of Wentz. They're slower to draft Jalen Hurts, right? I think that's interesting. And also, maybe part of why Wentz fell off was due to injuries as well. So I think that's a very interesting what if, even though it actually worked out for the team that had the injury. The fourth one we'll talk about, just DeShaun Watson in general. They'll spend forever on this, but obviously if he didn't have the scandal thing, he was such a good player for Houston. He was going to request to be traded, but he would have been traded, a year prior than he actually was, so he probably wouldn't have been traded to the Cleveland Browns because they still liked Baker Mayfield at that point because he didn't play through the injury that 1 year, so Watson probably goes somewhere else, and assuming him sitting out a year, like he was able to, if he was able to still be DeShaun Watson and still play as well, what happens there? How does that whole thing go down? Very thing that could have been a lot of fun, ultimately ended up being not a lot of fun. Next up is a couple decades ago, the Cleveland Browns moved and became the Baltimore Ravens. That could have not happened if they weren't able to move to Baltimore. What would have happened? Well, first, the owner most likely would have sold, which means that you still have Bill Belichick as head coach, and you still have Ozzie Newsome in the front office. There's a very real chance that the Cleveland Browns, instead of, when they got integrated into the NFL and have just been kind of awful ever since, there was a world where they could have had Belichick as a head coach and essentially the Ravens front office. Is there some sort of hybrid Patriots-Ravens team that could have been awesome for decades to come in Cleveland? Cleveland could have maybe been a dynasty had all that happened, and there would be no Baltimore Ravens, which would be very interesting as well. So yeah, definitely one of the all-time what ifs. Another all-time what if Bo Jackson stayed healthy. Obviously one of the freak athletes of all time, just had the hip injury that we all know about that. But yeah, that's very fascinating to see what could have been there. And that's not the only Bo Jackson what if I have. Also, what if Bo Jackson played for the Buccaneers? Again, very famously, the Buccaneers had the first overall pick. They wanted to select Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson told them, if you select me, I will not play for you. I will play baseball instead. The Buccaneers kind of said, yeah, come on. We sure, that's what you're saying, but once we draft you, you're not going to waste a year of being able to play in the NFL just to, go to a different organization. Like that's just not going to happen. They select him, and then Bo Jackson never played for him. So the question is, what if Bo Jackson did play for the Buccaneers? This kind of ties into the last one. Does he never have the hit that causes him to get injured? And does he have the whole career that he would have had, that he could have had something like this happen? Is he, one of the all-time greats if he plays for the Buccaneers in the, in the creamsicle uniforms? I guess we'll never know. Next up, this is a really interesting one. So Reggie White, coming from the USFL, back when that was actually a competitor to the NFL, they had a draft where they're going to have the players who coming from that going to the NFL were going to be drafted. Reggie White was on the board. He was one of the players that was going to get selected, and the Giants had a pick when he was still on the board. They also had Lawrence Taylor. I thought most people would consider those the two best edge rushers of all time, right? Like there's some other people you could throw in, but like those are pretty consensusly the two best, and they could have had them on the same team at the same time. The Giants did draft a Hall of Fame offensive lineman who actually didn't play for them, but with that selection. But still, you have to just wonder, like, again, Giants also went on to then win 2 Super Bowls, so it worked out okay, but you just have to wonder how good that defense could have been if they had, another legend. Next up, what if John Elway stays with the Colts? Have to talk about this one. Kind of the first time of something like this happening, I feel like, maybe just in sports in general. The Baltimore Colts at the time were just not a great organization, right? Let's just put it that way. They were struggling ever since the Johnny Unitas years. They just did not have much going on. They had the first overall pick and drafted John Elway. However, John Elway, who was also a baseball player, made this the Bo Jackson threat, essentially saying, hey, I'm not going to play for you. I want to go somewhere else. I'll play baseball with the Yankees if I have to. And essentially, the Colts said, well, we're not going to lose you for nothing. So what we'll do is we'll trade you. They traded him to the Broncos, and of course, Elway went on to make 5 Super Bowls and win 2 of them with the Broncos. The Colts were not able to win another Super Bowl until Pton Manning came around. So yeah, definitely you have to wonder, does Elway have the career that he has with the Broncos? Like maybe he probably made the right call, right? So like what happens if he stays with the Colts? Ultimately, worked out for him, didn't work out too well for the Colts. And finally, let's go from a guy who left the Colts to a guy who's brothers with a Colts legend, Eli Manning, who of course, was technically drafted for like 10 minutes with the San Diego Chargers. He did not want to play for the Chargers. They made it very clear that they don't want to play for the Chargers. They want to go to the Giants. ultimately a trade gets worked out where Phillip Rivers gets traded, and then there's some other draft capital involved. Rivers goes to the Chargers. Eli Manning stays with the Giants. Eli Manning wins 2 Super Bowls with the Giants. Phillip Rivers had some good years with the Chargers, but they were never able to get over the hump. And of course, the question you just have to ask is, Eli Manning had a flair for the big game moments. Does he win Super Bowls with the Chargers, or does Phillip Rivers win Super Bowls with the Giants, or does neither happen? And does Tom Brady just have 2 more rings, including an undefeated season to his resume? That's definitely just interesting, and I wonder what happens there, but we'll never know, which is what makes it a great what if. So yeah, those are 10 more what ifs. Let me know what you think of these in the comments below. Always love hearing from you, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.